Welcome to the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast. We're Gen Z founders, leaders, builders, entrepreneurs, pioneers. I'm your host, Spencer McPartland. Today, I'm honored to sit down with Mr. Grady Banister. Mr. Grady's built a career in serving the high-stakes environment, Defense Information Systems Agency, and studied at the Naval War College. His work is focused on transport and resiliency leadership skills that directly translate into entrepreneurship in life. And Mr. Grady, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Spencer.
So Mr. Grady, could you share how you first got started in the defense and Navy world?
Well, I left my small town in Georgia. Preparation I had there, the one item I could probably single out as putting me on this path was Boy Scouting. It was a small town, rural upbringing. Boy Scouting, of course, on my horizons, and subsequently high school, ROTC, and then I went into the Navy. The Navy provided opportunities for me to get an education and a career, which I continued for a year. Got out, retired when I reached my retirement point, and subsequently went into industry for about 7 years, with IBM and Leidos. And then I went back into government as a civil servant. We're now for the terrestrial portfolio. That is all of the data transportation mechanisms. And that's a very broad description of what it is around the world for the Department of Defense. That's a little update beyond your bio there. I put in a new position 2 weeks ago. So.
I thought you were gonna kind of say it was the DOT a little bit, Department of Transportation.
No, I never worked at the Department of Transportation. No, it's transport as in data transport, mainly terrestrial and undersea fiber optic, which carries 90 to 95% of worldwide data.
Now, is there one experience early in your career that shaped your leadership style and also kind of carried over into Boy Scouts? Because I know you brought that up as well.
In Boy Scouts, I had a lot of good examples of leaders, probably some of the earliest examples of leaders that I was exposed to. But I've had a number of good leaders, bosses, however you want to describe them, over the years, both in uniform, in industry, and now back in government now again. So a lot of inspirations along the way, a lot of good examples, a few bad examples. You can learn from both. But, it's hard to call out any one. There were so many. That first boss in high school, that first department head when I was in the Navy, that the first senior executive I worked for at the Pentagon, senior executive in industry. There's always someone, even at my age, you look for examples, if not mentors, who guide you, particularly when you're learning the ropes in a new job. Leadership principles are universal. Tailoring them to the particular environment you're in, basically learning a new language. When you go to a new organization, you need to find someone who's empathetic, and they've all been there before and can help you learn the ropes. So there's always been examples along the way.
Now, how does that kind of differentiate? Because I know you said IBM. How does that differentiate from corporate versus kind of what the government does, where it's kind of government run or government based?
Well, obviously, corporate is the corporation at large is driven by profit. That is what all businesses are driven by and thrive on. They want to make the company grow. They want to get return for shareholders, that sort of stuff. But at the ground level where I and everyone else works, your relationships, your goals, that sort of stuff, pretty universal across government and business. You have leaders, you have teammates, you look to get people the resources they need to get their job done. You get to, knock down barriers to prevent progress. If you're in a leadership position, you do that for others. If you're a teammate, you also do it for others. It's kind of universal in that regard at the technical level. Organization is motivated, industry motivated by profit. Department of Defense motivated by readiness to defend the nation. But when you get down to executing what you have to do day to day, it's the same thing. It's driven by on-the-ground leadership, and it's driven by loyalty to your teammates and a focus on your tasks, your missions, your goals.
Now, is there something that wouldn't have happened if you didn't choose the current path that you were on? Meaning, if you look back, would you be in a different position than where you have ended up?
I don't know. The path I It's like those old-fashioned games where you drop a marble at the top and it bounces around all the pegs, and where it ends up is pretty much random. That's how life is. You can look back on it and you can see where the decision points, the turns were, but when you're there on the ground that day, you have no clue. You have no perspective. You have no idea that what you did that day is going to decide. You don't even recognize that as a fork in the road. But you look back on it and go, yeah, man, there's a number of forks in the road. If there was any one thing I had done differently, I would have ended up somewhere else. And I think that's the case with you.
Working in defense requires adaptability and resilience. And how do you define resilience, and how do you build it in the teams that you've had in the past and currently?
Well, resiliency in transport, data transport, which is, as you described in my biography, I used to be a division chief for the PMO, the Program Management Office for Defense Information Systems Networks. Resiliency and the efforts to make things more resilient. You can define that in many ways, such as systems that self-mitigate or self-repair, or have the ability to withstand damage and continue to work on. But both with people and with systems, resiliency in its most basic level is the ability to the person or the system to take a punch or a push or have an objective blocked or whatever and still be able to carry on. It's systems where if a node, a satellite, or fiber or whatever are interrupted, they're still able to push data to a point on the other side of the world, a form of resilience. Or if you're a person who you're a program manager, you find your budget's been cut with little or no notice, or a vendor is unable to provide you with something you had been counting on to get to your goal. Your ability to bounce and continue on toward your goal is another form of resilience. Now, there's also personal resilience. You in your life taking a hit, whether it's, illness, death in the family, financial, whatever, and being able to continue on and be productive. That too is resiliency. So it's just toughness.
Now, is there a way to do it if, let's say, you're a team leader and things don't go the way that either your plan or whatever, that they either go sideways or it didn't go as according to plan, meaning you lost budget funding or people decided to leave the company or whatever other reasons?
Happens every day. Every day. There's an old maxim, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And that is true. In my current role, for whom I work, we make plans constantly. They never work out. They never work out the way they're written, the way they're imagined ahead of time. But the value in a plan is in the course of making that plan, you're also identifying all the resources, all the processes, all of stakeholders. You have all the information, all the tools there. You got the big pile of Legos. If you're not going to end up building what you thought you were going to build out of those Legos, and you end up having to build something else, you still have those Legos. So that is a true value in a plan. It allows you to think out what you want to get to. It allows you to recognize and identify what you have to get there. And if you have to rearrange it to go around an obstacle or overcome a challenge, then you're familiar with the parts and you can do that.
What's the parallel that's between what you've learned in the military and kind of what's carried over to the teams?
It almost carries over exactly into business. Organizations are not made out of things, they're made out of people. And whether that organization is for the Defense Chief Information Officer's office, or a helicopter squadron, or a ship, or the Defense Information Systems Agency, they're all made out of people. If you it's a warehouse full of Lord knows how many millions of dollars of electronic components over 40. That's all well and good. Some of that stuff is top-notch technology, industry standard, extremely valuable, extremely capable and utilized. The problem is without people, it's useless. It's worthless. The people and the skills they bring and the values they have are what make it all happen. 99% of being successful in an organization and reaching a goal is managing and leading the people and giving them the resources. And by resources, I don't just mean those widgets that are sitting in a warehouse, but time, help, as in other people, enough people, funds to do the activities they need to do. All those things that are people-centric, people needs, striking a good work-life balance, those sorts of things, so people don't burn out. Giving those people what they need, that is the bread and butter of an organization, whether it's military corporate. So those skills you learn in scouting, those skills you learn as in the military, both as a follower and a leader, translate completely into either business at a company or in a civilian agency like DISA or in an Army battalion. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, the volume may be louder in an Army battalion and then, a lot more yelling, but you're still trying to do the same things. You're trying to get everyone pointed and herd the cats and pointed toward a goal. And in getting to that goal, you're giving those people what they need to get there, and you're getting everything out of the way for them to progress toward that.
Now, what if they're not met? Meaning, what if the people don't get either the benefits or whatever that they were guaranteed when they signed up for their job or whatever? And either that, or with things now where people could get replaced by their systems automation or kind of whatever new technology that could come along.
Well, I have yet to see a go into a server room and mount things in the rack. But when we get to that, I'll be concerned about these people. Well, the people I deal with, they're not only, AI can architect stuff, AI can write code, AI can do lots of things, but AI can't leap off the screen of that laptop. AI can't come off of that piece of paper you have there. It takes a person to actually do it. AI is really only as good as the data information you put into it. A person still has to execute it. And when the day comes when we have anthropomorphic robots can walk around and do it for us, and then, we become like those fat people in the lonely rolling around in little hover wheelchairs. Until that day comes along, it actually takes people to do it. AI and new technologies in that vein are a tool to be utilized to help us do things that we do better. Takes a lot of the grunt work out. But in the end, it takes a human being actually to execute an architecture. It's a human being to do quality assurance of whatever design is out there, whether it was developed by human or AI, large language model or something. I don't see, particularly in government right now, there's not a lot of movement toward people, at least in Department of Defense, where I work, really a need for people to be replaced by that sort of technology, because the people sitting in those desks around me are experts in their field, and they can sit at a computer and maybe use AI to help design something. But they're also the same people that get up, grab their tool bag, and go overseas and install stuff. And not only can software account do that, not only that, but when things don't go well, we haven't reached a point where we can replace the human who could troubleshoot, identify problems, and intuitively kind of suss out things that are not obvious, which is the case in many of these complex systems.
I know part of what you mentioned was kind of the little analogy of the person sitting on the couch in the wheelchair. Is that gonna end up happening? Because I know that a lot of people now, if you, let's say before AI, you had to do a lot of the thinking work versus now you just type it into the chatbot and it does all the analytical work or the thinking work for you. Now you just go, okay, I can just put it into the computer and it's going to do all the work for me.
Well, and I don't trust it, because particularly those things they're instructed on language that's been developed. The language going into them, whether that's mathematical language or a written solution, they're only as good as the data they went into. And you can read in the news, the silliness that comes out of the various large language model, ChatGPT, those sorts of things. They can quickly go down a rabbit hole, and the computer version of going insane. Mathematically, you could get the same issue. If you got something running code and there's not a human to interpret it or provide quality assurance of it with their intuitive skills, it's a lot of trust to be placing something that could potentially have impact on our lives. What I worry about in that, the rapid introduction of AI into the workplace, is I think they're doing it incorrectly, and particularly in industry, not less so in government. They are using it to replace those grunt tasks like coding and writing reports and all that stuff. But those are the things that new employees cut their teeth on and learn through, so that in 15 years, they're managers, 25, 30 years, they're CEOs and COOs. where is that training ground for senior people if we don't have jobs for younger people in the technologies? 5, 10 years ago, it was, got to get all our kids into coding. And now, like, well, computer science, we don't need that anymore. Software engineering. Okay, that's great. 10 years from now, who's going to be the experienced coder, software author, whatever? It's going to check the AI's work.
So is this kind of a little bit like what happened in the 80s with the computer revolution a little bit? But we're saying, no, we're kind of scaling it back, saying it's not as important to not focus on it.
The computer revolution in the 80s, it kind of represented a sea change in the economy of the United States. It became something that we were very good at. And as labor costs went up in this country, we got out of heavy industry. And looking at that Apple on your computer right now, the Apples and the other Microsoft and others, Google, these became such huge companies and such a big part of our economy because there was this almost conscious decision to shift from those heavy industries to a technology-driven industry. We as a nation did not lose too many jobs. We just shifted. I mean, 30 years ago, how many computing jobs were there? First together, a lot. Now, how many people are in the computing field? Wow. How many people are assembling cars?
Not all.
Few. Do we have people on bread lines on the side of the road? No, we don't. I think, like computers, AI and new technologies it won't be smooth. There'll be fits and starts. We won't exactly figure it out because, we may think we have a plan, back to plans. We may think we have a plan. It's never going to turn out the way we expect it to. We run into realities, particularly realities we won't anticipate. And we'll figure it out. It's going to take a while. It's going to suck. I'd hate to walk out of college right now with a computer science degree. These kids, they were able to write their own checks 5 years ago, and now they can't find a job.
Which would kind of stink. I know that I don't mean to cut it short. But I also want to make sure that we don't get kicked out of the lab. I know that the librarian was like, "What? Close at 4:45." Because I know I had a lot of these questions, and that I'm trying to make sure that we get the most out of it. So the last person that came on here, his question is, "What is your plan to be successful, and what does success look like to you?" And then I'm also gonna pair that with also, if you could ask the next guest one question, not knowing who it will be, what would it be? Yeah, what would it be?
What is your biggest regret in your career?
Is it just as a whole, kind of, what do you regret not doing, or is it just kind of
just what is your biggest regret in your career?
Okay? And then my last question is, are there
not important what?
Yeah,
what
I know.
important is how they dealt with it.
So whether it was a negative or a positive?
Yeah, you can't have positive regret. But no, let them answer that, and then the follow-on question is, how did you deal with that? And obviously, if you're interviewing them, they were successful, so they were. So,
Though that a lot of people are. And my last question is, are there 2 to 3 people you know in leadership, business, or service who'd make great guests for this podcast?
That you can get to? Probably somebody that you know on Mr. Van Wagner. Mr. Dave is a government contractor, very engineer. So he would bring he might give you a very interesting read on emerging.
Just because he's the way that Northrop Grumman is going about it, or?
I don't know who he works for.
I think he works for Northrop Grumman.
I know he's doing submarine work for them. But he is very much a practical engineer as well as kind of a futurist. He's always looking forward to new technologies, but he can pull out a piece of paper and a slide rule and do the math. He might give you a better insight, or at least a different insight into emerging technologies and its impact place in the corporate world. Where I have been, the corporate world was always in information technology consultancy, and then I shifted over back into government, where I was actually leading that information technology, in this case, telecommunications. He is a practical engineer solving problems for his customers, and he could probably give you some insight. He also is probably very familiar with the challenges that young engineers are facing as they come into the workplace. So he might be a good one to play.
Is there one more?
Oh, you want another one? Oh, crap. I don't get out of it. Can't think of anybody that's down in a similar vein would be Mr. Voshak. Young lady, Mr. Lawbetting, government engineer, and I'm giving you old technology. That's where I live. I do technology, Boy Scouts. That's it. Captain Server, who during COVID came and visited the troop online, he knew similar insights to this. Mr. John is a government contractor. I think he's still in the industry. That's right. That's all I got. My world is small.
Doesn't have to be super big. So, Mr. Grady, thank you for sharing your leadership lessons and experiences with us. Your insight on resilience, mentorship, and decision making under pressure. Us and the young entrepreneurs can apply directly to their own journeys.